ridges of Appalachia, where daylight barely pierces the canopy, and silence hangs heavier than mist. Whispers speak of a family unlike any other. They were not merely outcasts. They were feared, shunned, and branded with a darkness that made even hardened men cross themselves at the sound of their name. For over a century, the Turner bloodline lived beyond the grasp of law and God-bound by their own blood, trapped in hunger and accused of horrors too terrible to speak aloud. This is not just a tale of poverty. It is not just a tale of isolation. It is a tale of survival at any cost, and the terrible price a family paid when the world turned its back. This is the story of the Turner family, the most dangerous inbred cannibals in Appalachia. The mountains do not give up their secrets easily. Beneath the dense green of Appalachia, past the winding streams and trails known only to hunters, there are hollows where the air itself feels wrong. The birds fall silent. The underbrush stirs, though no wind passes through. And it is there, in a gash of forested land, called Turner's Hollow, that the story begins. No one remembers the first Turner who fled into those woods. Some say it was a man cast out from his church after a scandal too shameful to write down. Others say it was a fugitive, hiding from justice in the war years, who took his kin with him to escape the law. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: the Turners chose isolation over judgment. They built crude cabins with their own hands, carved fields out of rock and clay, and swore themselves to no town, no preacher, no outsider. In those cabins, lit only by the glow of weak lanterns, they lived and multiplied, cousin to cousin, brother to sister. Their blood grew tighter with each generation. The Turners looked different than others in the valley. Faces seemed too similar, jaws twisted, eyes sometimes cloudy from birth. And yet, their most striking feature was not deformity, but hunger. Gaunt cheeks, sunken eyes, ribs pushing against skin. Hunger is its own kind of prison. The land gave little, and the Turners were not welcome to trade in town. Neighbors claimed they stole chickens in the night, or crept into corn cribs and took what they could carry. But there were darker whispers, of bones left gnawed in the ashes, of their fire pits, of children who vanished on mountain paths and were never seen again. The sheriff could never prove such things, but proof was not needed when fear ran so deep. The Turners were not fools. They knew the land better than anyone alive. They could vanish into the brush without sound, slipping between trees, as if the forest itself obeyed them. Hunters swore that the Turners watched from the tree line, waiting, their pale eyes reflecting firelight like predators. If you strayed too close to Turner's Hollow, you might see a figure standing just beyond reached in, barefoot, silent, watching, always watching. Inside their cabins, the atmosphere was worse. The floors were packed dirt, stained and uneven. The air smelled of wood smoke, sweat, and something sour a meat that had hung too long. In the dim candlelight, family members sat shoulder to shoulder, staring into the flame as though it carried every secret they dared not speak. Food was scarce, always scarce, and when famine came, the whispers claimed, bloodlines twisted tighter than flesh alone. One story, passed down by neighboring families, tells of a boy who wandered too far into the hollow in winter. His father found only a shoe in the snow, frozen, stiff. When the thaw came, hunters stumbled across bones near the Turner homestead. The marrow had been split, as though by teeth. Another tale tells of a woman, one of the Turners themselves, who gave birth to a child so twisted and silent that she buried it behind the cabin without a word. When asked by her sister, she simply said, "We don't waste what God takes back." It is hard to know how much of this is truth and how much is fear, but fear itself can build walls stronger than stone. By the time the 20th century dawned, no one dared travel into Turner land. Their hollow was marked on no map, mentioned in no sermon. Even saying the name aloud was thought to bring ill luck. Outsiders would laugh nervously, and say it was only hill gossip. Yet none of them dared test it. What made the Turners so dangerous was not only their secrecy, nor their hunger, nor the deformities born of bloodline upon bloodline. It was their unity. Outsiders had no allies in that hollow. One Turner could appear before you on the trail, and before you drew a breath, 3 more would be in the trees, silent and still, with eyes fixed like wolves circling prey. They did not forgive trespass. They did not forget insult. And so, over decades, the family became more than human in the minds of those who lived nearby. They became myth. The Turners were the boogeymen of Appalachia, the specters who moved in the fog and dragged you screaming from the path. To some, they were barely people at all, but a warning, a living punishment for sin and secrecy. To others, they were evidence of what happens when a family is cast out and left to rot in its own hunger. The truth, of course, lies in the shadows between, and as we peer deeper into Turner Hollow, as we let the silence settle and the forest close in, one question rises, like a chill in the spine. What would a family do when every door is locked against them, when every stomach growls with emptiness, when shame chains them tighter than iron? The Turners had already begun to answer that question, and the answer was darker than the forest itself. The hollow is quiet by day. Only the scurrying of small animals, only the breath of the wind moving through skeletal trees. But night, in Turner land, is different. The air itself feels like it holds its breath. Torches flicker behind warped cabin walls, and from within, voices rise and fall like chants. Sometimes, a scream echoes faintly, carried on the wind, stripped of its human shape by the long dark distance. The people in the valley below shudder when they hear it. They say to themselves, just a fox, just a wildcat, but in their hearts, they know the truth. For the Turners did not fear the night. The night was theirs. Bare feet padded across the forest floor, silent as shadows. Lanterns from neighboring farms glowed faintly in the distance, beacons of food, warmth, life, and hunger drove them out of their cabins again and again. Chickens vanished. Pigs were slaughtered in their pens, their bones left scattered, smokehouses broken into, meat stripped clean. These raids were constant, but not what terrified the valley most. It was when people went missing. There is one tale, told in hushed voices, of a traveling peddler who wandered too far into the Turner Hollow. He was a stranger, not knowing the warnings. His wagon was found days later on the road, overturned, his horse still tethered, but wild-eyed, starving. Of the man himself, nothing, not a bone, not a button. The sheriff searched, but the woods gave up no answers. The whispers, though, said everything. The Turners took him, inside those dark cabins, where hunger never loosened its grip, where generations of blood had already blurred together. The boundaries of survival bent until they snapped. In winter, when the earth froze hard and the fields gave nothing, the family looked not to crops nor livestock. They looked inward toward flesh. Outsiders believed the Turners practiced the unthinkable, that they killed their own weak children, the sickly elders, and roasted them in the flames to stave off starvation. Mothers, it was said, wept not because of death, but because there would be food for another week. No preacher ever entered their cabins to test this truth. No lawman dared to press further. But the fear clung like smoke, spreading from valley to valley. Parents warned their children, do not wander into the woods. Do not follow the creek into the hollow. The Turners are watching, and if they find you, you will not return. The family grew more grotesque with each generation, faces stretched and warped by blood too close, eyes clouded, lips twisted, limbs bent. Some of their children never walked, some never spoke. Yet even those who could not speak were said to moan at night, rocking in the corners of their cabins, their cries carrying into the trees like ghosts. And still, the Turners endured. They clung to each other with a ferocity that was almost holy. in its devotion. Outsiders hated them, mocked them, feared them, but inside the family, blood was the only law. To betray the Turners was to invite death. To leave them was to starve alone in the mountains. Their deformities, their hunger, their violence, it was all bound together by secrecy so tight it suffocated. Neighbors spoke of strange symbols carved into the beams of their cabins, half crosses, half scratches, as though the Turners still longed for religion, but no preacher's words would ever fit their mouths. They whispered prayers over bones in the fire. They painted faces with ash. They spoke in a language only they could understand. It was said they believed outsiders were not truly human, that only the blood of Turners mattered, that the rest of the world was food, and nothing more. This belief made them dangerous beyond hunger, for when men are convinced only their blood matters, all others become meat. The Turners became predators in their own land. Travelers avoided the roads. Women carried knives when they fetched water. Hunters walked in pairs, never alone. And still, the woods claimed more. Each disappearance folded itself into the legend, until the Turners were not merely thieves, not merely inbred, not merely starving. They became cannibals in the mines of Appalachia. By the time the 1920s came, the Turner name was spoken only in curses. If livestock went missing, it was the Turners. If a hunter failed to return, the Turners. If bones were found in the woods, gnawed and cracked, the Turners. Perhaps not all of it was true. Perhaps not all of it was theirs. But fear does not care for truth. Fear makes its own legends, and once a family is branded in fire, there is no washing it away. And so the hollow grew darker, generation after generation, with each new child born of cousin and cousin, with each winter, where smoke rose from cabins, though no crops grew in the fields. The line between myth and reality disappeared. The Turners were monsters. The Turners were cannibals. The Turners were a family so bound to their own cursed blood that nothing else, no law, no church, no God could pry them apart. Yet still, they lived. Still, they endured. And as the decades dragged on, the world around them modernized, softened, connected by roads and wires and radio. But not in the hollow. The hollow was a place of silence, of hunger, of rituals older than memory. The hollow belonged to the Turners. And every shadow seemed to whisper the same question. What happens when monsters no longer hide, but step forward into the world of men? The years bled one into another, and still the hollow whispered. But by the 1930s, the whispers had grown too loud. Farmers could not keep animals, children vanished, travelers refused the mountain roads. The name Turner was no longer spoken. In warning, it was spoken in anger. Fear curdled into fury, and fury seeks fire. It began with a single spark. A boy of 13, the son of a valley farmer, failed to return from gathering kindling near the creek. His footprints ended at the water's edge. Search parties scoured the woods, calling his name until their voices cracked. But the only answer was silence, until dogs caught a scent, not of the boy, but of smoke and meat, drifting down from the Turner cabins. The sheriff came, flanked by men carrying shotguns and axes. But lawmen had come before, and the Turners had outlasted them all. Their hollow was a fortress, their paths hidden, their cabins crouched like beasts waiting to strike. The sheriff called out names, demanded answers, but the trees themselves seemed to swallow his words. The men with him said they heard something in reply, a low moan, not animal, not human. And then the smell came stronger. Burnt hair, cooked flesh. The men broke. They surged forward, torches lifted, boots thundering over roots and rocks. They stormed into the hollow, not as lawmen, but as executioners. What they found has never been written cleanly in any record. The cabins were dark inside, filthy with straw and bones, the air thick with grease smoke. Some say they found cauldrons blackened over coals, meat boiling inside. Others swore they saw limbs, hacked crudely, stacked like firewood. The Turners did not fight as men. They screamed, shrieked, clawed. Some were half naked, some crawling on all fours, some so twisted by birth they could barely stand. Mothers clutched children with faces blurred by deformity. The men of the valley hesitated just long enough to see the truth. This was not merely a family. This was a tribe of shadows, born of hunger and secrecy, made monstrous by both. The valley men showed no mercy. The cabins burned, flames clawing skyward, until the hollow glowed red like the mouth of hell itself. Gunshots cracked through the smoke, screams twisted into silence, and by dawn, the Turner Hollow was nothing but ash and cinders. But here's the thing about legends. Fire does not kill them. The men returned to their homes, but not all returned whole. They carried with them the images of what they had seen, the twisted faces in the firelight, the smell of human flesh, the cries of children who had never seen a world beyond those dark cabins. Some said the Turners deserved it. Others, in quiet hours, wondered if the valley had killed not monsters, but a family damned by poverty and blood. Still, the story spread. Strangers in nearby towns whispered of cannibals hunted down in the hills. The tale grew with each retelling. Some said not all Turners had perished, that a few slipped into the forest, deeper than any torch could reach, carrying with them the cursed bloodline. Hunters claimed to see shapes moving in the tree line at dusk. Farmers found bones gnawed clean near their fences. Children swore they heard voices singing from the hollow long after it burned. The legend of the Turners became eternal, a story parents told to frighten restless children, a warning etched into the Appalachian soul. Stay close to home, do not stray too far into the woods. For the Turners are still out there, waiting, hungry, and maybe, just maybe, it was true. For even in recent years, hikers whisper of strange encounters in those hills. A figure half hidden, face clouded, eyes unblinking. A voice calling their name, though no one was there. The faint smell of smoke, though no fire burned. The hollow itself remains. Trees grew back, masking the scars of fire, but the earth remembers. The stones remember. And on nights when the wind cuts through the branches just right, the mountain seems to groan with voices, moans, carried down from the hills, the last echoes of a family consumed by itself. The Turner bloodline may be ash, or it may live still, hidden in shadows, clinging to hunger. But either way, the story remains, carved into the Appalachian dark, a family who became legend, a legend who became horror, and a horror that will never, ever die.